It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and a bad one for whoever just went through that sheet of glass. Bashir's the cause, and he might have had good reason if the guy getting up again with a knife in his hand is any indication. Bashir knocking him out with a champagne cork confirms he's having his jollies in a holosuite, but not quite as jolly as he wanted them to be, as he and a woman are interrupted by the arrival of Plain Simple Garak. Bashir spending all his personal time in this new holosuite program has got a lot of people curious, so Plain Simple Garak decided to invite himself in, unannounced, through a locked door. Plain Simple Garak suggesting he's embarrassed by having this knockoff James Bond fantasy scene causes Bashir to let him stay. Back to Bashir's opulent holographic lodgings we go, complete with a personal assistant wearing what could be generously described as half a suit. Finding out that it's all courtesy of the government he's working for as a spy leaves Plain Simple Garak lamenting the details of his own former career. It's a holosuite episode then, which means something has to go wrong. It comes in the form of Cisco and company returning from a conference of some sort in a mega shuttle. A technical fault spirals out of control very quickly, a situation explained by O'Brien saying it's not actually a fault, but deliberate sabotage. Eddington, who's been left in command from the looks of things, tries to teleport them out and almost succeeds. A kaboom heralds yet another mega shuttle going down the shitter and causes no end of issues for Eddington. Wibblies from the kaboom have buggered up a part of our own teleporter system. We still got them all stored in the ether, but not for long. We need to put them somewhere safe, so Eddington's going to stick them in the computer as data. Tangentially, we will not be discussing in the analysis how Star Trek has previously stated that their teleportation works using a stream of matter rather than data. For the sake of my own sanity, that's something we're all just going to have to ignore for now, alright? Alright. Anywho, storing several people as data requires a whole lot of storage, and the computer doesn't have space. The solution? Delete everything from as many places as necessary to free it up, which is certainly an interesting plan for a station that needs a whole lot of systems to stop everybody from dying, but let's ignore that one as well. Ops goes dark before rebooting in emergency power, and the terminals now show random numbers beneath the overlays. Eddington says our people have been stored, though where is a mystery. It's not a mystery for us, though, as we saw the start of the episode. Plain Simple Garak and Bashir are changing into more casual attire, the holosuite's apparently still running, when they hear an unexpected noise. Suitably armed, a button rotates Bashir's bar to reveal a bed with Kira on it. Bashir assumes this is part of the invasion started by Plain Simple Garak, but he knows nothing about it. Neither, it seems, does Kira, who refers to herself as Colonel Anastasia Komananov from the KGB. That leaves Bashir assuming the computer's done a fucko boingo and put Kira's physical parameters on the character. The computer says the character is correct and refuses to pause the program either due to an emergency. A call to Ops to find out what the bloody hell's going on also informs Eddington that the holosuites are still running, and one of them has a suspiciously Kira-shaped character in it. He thinks that might be where the computer stored Cisco, Kira, Dax, Worf, and O'Brien, which means shutting it down or leaving would be a big no-no. That means letting the story play out, so Kiranov starts the adventure by giving him a manila folder like what proper spies use. Some bugger's been making earthquakes all over the shop, and it's serious enough for opposing intelligence agencies to work together. They don't have a whole lot to go on at the moment, save for the reported kidnapping of a seismologist that looks a whole lot like Dax. Letting her character die might erase her, so we'd best go and do a bit of the old rescuing, hadn't we? Here's hoping her life expectancy is better than Miss Half-a-Suit, as she drops dead with a knife in her back after opening the door, and Eyepatch O'Brien follows a pair of goons in. He's taken the role of the guy who went through some glass earlier, and he's pissed off as a result. Kiranov demands a kiss before Bashir's execution, letting him take an earring from her. They're explosive, you see, a gift from him last Christmas, and the resulting distraction lets Bashir, Kiranov, and Plain Simple Garak knock out Eyepatch O'Brien and his mates. Not before Plain Simple Garak takes a knock to the face, though, just to let us all know those regularly worthless safety features are buggered yet again. Bashir stops Kiranov from putting some metal into Eyepatch O'Brien, as his character's death would likely mean the same as Dax's. This causes Plain Simple Garak to step in and tell Bashir that things have changed. Without those safeties, Eyepatch O'Brien's next attempt to kill him might be successful. Then who would save Dax? Speaking of which, Kiranov thinks she was taken from a club in Paris after being invited there by a mysterious figure suspected of kidnapping a bunch of other scientists, a man called Dr. Noah. Eddington's come to fiddle with the holosuites, and that might be a problem. Rom, the underappreciated brother, has had to jury-rig the shit out of them just to keep them running because Quark is a tight-assed git. Some fiddling establishes that the holosuite is storing our missing crew's bodies, but their brains are stored in everything else on the station. While they work out how to fix it, Bashir's off clubbing. He's pretending to be a scientist and wants to see Dr. Noah, something Duchamps, an associate of Noah's, played by Worf, can arrange, for a fee. Bashir doesn't have the money, but he does have enough to buy his way into the card game Worf is playing with the intention of winning the money from him. Up in Ops, we have some developments. We now know who sabotaged the Mega Shuttle, a Cardigan group upset at the current state of affairs, but that's largely irrelevant. What matters is Eddington and Rom are working together to fix our current problem using the Defiant. Once Rom's fiddled some more to make his alterations compatible with Starfleet tech, that is. Back in the holosuite, Bashir has won all of Worf's money. That gets him a ticket to see Dr. Noah, and the ticket is some sleeping powder from a fake cigar. They all awake in a study that Plain Simple Garak thinks could do with a makeover. Bit tactless when Dr. Noah's standing right there, but then maybe a part of Cisco thought it was ugly too. A meeting with the big bad means it's time for revealing the plan, and Dr. Siskoa doesn't disappoint. The world as it stands now, he says, is utter bollocks. Wouldn't it be better if we just had another go? That's why he's hidden lasers all over the globe with the willing help of people like Glasses Dax here, and intends to fire them all at once. The result will be earthquakes and lava and shit, after which this retreat here will be the only place that sits above Earth's new sea level. Dr. Siskoa can then restart humanity with the brilliant minds he's gathered here, safe from the flood on his mountain ark. Bashir, sadly, is not invited, and Eyepatch O'Brien arrives to remove him. Plain Simple Garak's not invited either from the looks of things, hence them both being tied to the frame of a laser. Dr. Siskoa's going to fire this one now and fill the cave with lava, but we're in knockoff James Bond, remember, so he has to give them a nice long 5-minute countdown. Plain Simple Garak thinks it's time to call it a day. They might not be able to save the others, but they can stop the program and save themselves. That becomes unnecessary when Glasses Dax comes to take readings, and Bashir tries to seduce her. Thankfully, she doesn't consider the plan quite as preposterous as Plain Simple Garak, and the kiss he gets comes with the key for their handcuffs. After they've fled through caves, Bashir tells Plain Simple Garak that they need to get to the control room. This story is set up so that either Glasses Dax or Kiranov dies at the end, and he needs to prevent both. Seeing the tiny pistol he's made from parts of his tuxedo is enough for Plain Simple Garak to call a halt again. Bashir might understand how to play act a spy, but Plain Simple Garak did it for real, and he survived this long by recognizing when to stop. He starts to call for the door to the holosuite, not believing Bashir's threat to shoot him, so he's very surprised when it happens. It's just a graze along his neck, but makes him understand Bashir's not fucking about, and Plain Simple Garak compliments him on being so surprising. Back to the ugly room we return, where our rescue attempt goes straight down the shitter. Eyepatch O'Brien goes down like a chump, but the unexpected arrival of Worf turns the tide, and we're forced to surrender. It's not all bad news, though. Eddington gives Bashir a call to let him know they're going to have a pop at fixing things in a couple of minutes, so all he has to do is stall. How do you stall a megalomaniacal bastard for a couple of minutes? Why, you make the case for joining them. Bashir's been a spy for a while after all, and he survived this long by recognizing when to stop. Dr. Siskoa has won. The world is already doomed, and what better way of proving that Bashir believes it than by being the one to pull the trigger? The lasers fire, and the world starts to shrink. Dr. Siskoa is surprised, but not so surprised that he doesn't still want to kill Bashir. Dr. Siskoa is teleported away before he can fire, along with everybody else that was being stored, and they reappear safe and sound on the Defiant. That leaves Bashir and Plain Simple Garak alone on what remains of Earth, though the latter seems to approve of Bashir's thoroughly unconventional plan. So much so that he suggests their next lunch date could be held in Bashir's holographic apartment if he's agreeable, so we'll leave them to plan future simulated spy shenanigans until the next adventure. See, this is what I meant when I said Little Green Men didn't fully hit the mark for me. I like my references to be both obvious and openly mocking. I'll grant you that the setup for this one allowed far more wiggle room to make that happen. Having a fake real spy taking the piss out of a fake spy gives you a lot more options on the comedy front, the best example being Plain Simple Garak's incredulity at Bashir's 10-second seduction of Glasses Dax. He suits sarcasm well, does our Plain Simple Garak, which might be one of the reasons why I like the character so much, now that I think about it. Anywho, Plain Simple Garak gives us a chance to point out all of the nonsense inherent in Bond films, but it's important to note that this episode is not purely for the purpose of bashing. We aren't just shitting on the more action-oriented spy thrillers here, we're examining the appeal, too. In a way, you could argue it's not dissimilar from what we're doing in these videos. We might point out the flaws and the times when disbelief needs suspending, but that doesn't mean we hate the subject matter. Acknowledging that media isn't perfect doesn't make it worthless. It means you care enough to have examined it in detail that the meal is worth savouring as individual flavours rather than just judging it as a whole. So too then with this episode. Plain Simple Garak might deride the laughable aspects of this fantasy, but Bashir understands that's the point. Spy thrillers are a power trip because they don't adhere to reality. If they did, they'd be as boring as, say, a science fiction show that refuses to put teleported characters into a holodeck because it doesn't really gel with the established lore. In all matters entertainment-related, the rule of cool should be given the highest priority. That's not to say this episode is nothing but a send-up of Bond stuff, of course. We get some great interaction between Bashir and Plain Simple Garak here, too. Bashir pointing out that Plain Simple Garak is offended at him finding entertainment in spy stuff is a particularly salient point, and one I think might be closer to the mark than his denials would suggest. Plain Simple Garak's main attribute is his mysterious past, after all, and something he deliberately cultivates. Seeing Bashir in what amounts to a trashy B-movie of his entire persona is going to be a difficult pill to swallow, regardless of how much he claims to have only professionalism in place of his ego. That might gel with his change of heart, too. Plain Simple Garak is the one to suggest returning at a future date, and he does so after Bashir used his own words to subvert the entire story and take everything on a complete tangent. Seeing that his own input was not only taken on board, but critical in the outcome, would certainly put things in a more positive light, and make him more open to seeing how these stories are a potential for experimenting. It's an important story for Bashir, too. He's always been somewhat innocent, often to the point of naivety, and starting the episode in a power trip fantasy certainly plays to that. When it gets serious, though, we show he's willing to cross boundaries. He ends up deliberately wounding Plain Simple Garak to make his point, and sufficiently muddies the water to imply he could have intended worse. That it's perfectly tailored, pardon the pun, to appeal to Plain Simple Garak shows Bashir is not the green graduate he once was. Plain Simple Garak strikes me as a man who's rarely surprised, so this course of action suggests that Bashir has learned not only how to pull it off, but also when that will be the right choice. There's a fair chance this also played a part in Plain Simple Garak's decision to return for future Holosuite shenanigans. I can certainly imagine him wanting to see just how much of an influence he's had on Bashir. We'll end with an interesting snippet from this episode. When Bashir's responding to the arrival of Plain Simple Garak, we learn that breaking into a holosuite in use is a crime. Given the wide variety of activity available, an expectation of privacy is understandable. This, however, is the first indication I can recall of there being a legal aspect to the whole thing, though I'll grant you that could be a purely Bajoran law, as the station is technically running to their rules. There are a few implications for this whole thing. The first is functional, that holosuites can provide restricted access while in use. If Plain Simple Garak had to break in, then it was obviously locked in some way. That opens up questions about whether programs default to being locked or can be locked by users, or perhaps do so based on the content. That Jake was able to pop into a holosuite while Eggnog was running a flight simulator previously suggests that it is not the default. The second implication is more curious, though. The expectation of privacy to the point where there are laws to enforce it in a medium that can create anything suggests a significant level of importance has been placed on personal responsibility. I'm certainly glad that humans of the 24th century have grown up, because I can think of quite a few people who would abuse the absolute shit out of such responsibility today. End of episode.
A new nefarious plot arrives for us to thwart and, in so doing, possibly come into possession of some snacks. Right then, how are we going to deal with this threat to destroy our station from Astroshen's mate, Ordinateur?
It's taken care of.
You what?
I already sorted it.
What the bloody hell do you mean you've already sorted it?
I figured that in the space of a few days, there's no way Astroshen and Ordinateur could have planned anything capable of destroying a space station. The whole thing was completely bogus. It was just Ordinateur transmitting an empty threat from a broom closet in Quarks. I tracked it back, then went and kicked him in the dick. It's all sorted.
You daft bastard, that were our plot for the rest of season. We got 16 more of these sodding things to do.
Oh. I thought it would be quicker if I just...
Now he's got to write something new in time for next Tuesday. You think ideas grow on trees? We're already breaking fourth wall on the reg. This lad's running on empty.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Look, viewers, if the next story's shite, blame this dingbat, alright? Oof.